Welcome to The Mystic Lens, a podcast by Current Collective Church where we explore the spiritual path through stories of transformation from real people in our community and explorations of Christian tradition through a mystic perspective. Our hope is that these conversations will help us feel even more connected to God, ourselves, and each other, inspiring us to live more expansively from the well of living water within. To learn more or connect with us further, visit thisiscurrent.org.
This might be the intro.
Hi, everybody.
This is it. We'll just roll with this.
I love having a mic. I feel important.
You are.
Thanks, bro.
You are important.
So are you, dude.
So, welcome to the Mystic Lens podcast.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining me on this very first season.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining me on the big comfy couch.
Of course. Do you have a tagline for the podcast?
I don't. What would it be?
On the spot, like from your heart. What do you think the tagline would be?
The tagline for the Mystic Lens probably would have to be, I can see clearly now the rain is gone.
I love that.
There we go. That's the lens. That's what we're hoping to help each other do, is to, clear up some of the rain so you can see clearly. That's just my gut intuitive stare at the wall on the spot.
Well, hopefully it's not trademarked or anything.
It's immediately flagged.
Yeah, right.
The episode isn't even live now. Thanks for joining me on the big comfy couch. I will say this is the first time. I had one other podcast friend come over and we had a other couch and we ordered this one. And so now you're the first guest on the new couch.
Oh my God.
So,
welcome. This is actually a really nice couch.
Thank you. It's comfortable. A lot more comfortable than the other one. I kind of feel bad for my other buddy who had to endure an hour with me on the other couch. I mean, it was fine, but whatever. So nonetheless, welcome and thanks for joining me here, Max.
Super stoked.
So I want to talk a little bit about just how you found your way into the space. So for those that are listening, this podcast, the intention with it is that people that actually come into this space that know people in the space of Current can learn a little bit more about each other's stories, because sometimes when we're just gathering on a Sunday, it's hard to, talk to everybody, or maybe it could be a little intimidating or whatever. The hope is that you get to hear more perspectives of the spiritual life, of navigating that, not just from me sharing talks, but from people in the community. And then that way, when you see these people, you can have something interesting. If something sparks in the conversation that we have and they're like, oh man, I want to chat more with Max about that. When they see you at a whatever event or a Sunday, they can drop in with you and it makes life a lot easier. So
great idea. I think it's a great way to bring people together. And I just love starting conversations because, like you said, people can see themselves in the stories that we share. And there was a time recently that you posted on your Instagram, one of Lindsay's performances, not wife Lindsay, but sound healer Lindsay. She talked about her vision experience with Jesus. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm so glad that you posted that, because I too had a very similar experience where I had like a vision. Well, not like a vision, but like Jesus came to me when I was in a meditative state and passed on, a message and kind of altered the course of my kind of spiritual path, if you will. And we can definitely get into that later if you want to, but
we're definitely going to get into that later.
But it was just cool because it was like, okay, now I can talk to her about that. Probably already felt comfortable talking to her about that, but like now we have like a focal point of a conversation where I can be like, oh yeah, that happened to me too, and it's less awkward. Maybe bringing that up.
Yep.
I think some reservations that I've had just being in a church environment is sharing like that more, I guess, woo-woo or I don't know, like out there side of like, oh yeah, I have visions, I see things in my dreams and stuff like that. So it's like, I am stoked to be here to share, and hopefully whoever's watching or listening can be like, oh, like I've had a similar experience like that, and hopefully they see me as a safe place to share some of that as well.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many ways that we can go from that, man. Because like, to your point, like, I love that we're able to be like weird spiritual people, but like in a space that feels like, you know, a lot of people are overcoming that too, of like, how far out can I be here, you know? And what I hope to, you know, dissolve is that fear about who you need to be in a space that is, for all intents and purposes, a church space, you know? And so would love to kind of talk a little bit about your background, and then maybe we can work up to that point of like the vision that happened.
Sure.
Because I feel like, and I share this in other talks with people here too on the podcast, is like, you know, just setting a stage for who you are. And that way, because different people are going to resonate with different people in the community, because we all are coming from very different backgrounds. Again, that's what I love about the space. A lot of times you go to churches and they all have kind of like very similar origin stories. Dude, the people that cruise through our space have like vastly different stories. Like when they're intersecting here, some people are coming just from extremely different backgrounds, you know? And I think that's what's cool about the space. But yeah, if you can just share a little bit about, you know, your history, your background. Did you grow up with some faith formation? I know we've talked some about this, but for people in the community.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to tell people that I had like the perfect breeding ground for a spiritual identity crisis, because I grew up on my dad's side, Christian upbringing. And then on my mom's side, there was a Judaic upbringing. We celebrated Hanukkah, you know, had the dreidels, all that.
Dang.
Then we also went to powwows because there's a little Native American Cherokee in there as well. And so growing up, I was like, you know, which way do I kind of lean spiritually? Always felt connected with Christ the figure, had my reservations about the Bible, but was just a good Christian boy as a kid for a little bit there. You know, there'd be times where I'd want to get out of church because, you know, waking up Sunday morning was not the vibe. So I kind of made a deal with my dad, and I'm like, yeah, I'll lead service for an at-home service if we can just, you know, stay home.
The negotiator.
Yeah, start at 11:30 maybe instead of 9 a.m. So yeah, that was fun for a time. And I feel like a lot of kind of my morals were founded or influenced rather by my time in church, like going to the Christian church, and do unto others as you want to be done unto yourself, you know, love your neighbor as yourself. But then also had the typical programming that I wasn't so comfortable with, like, you know, if you're saying you go to hell and going to burn in eternal hellfire, I never really resonated with that. And for myself,
No, go for good reason. Right?
Yeah. And you know, just some of the judgy stuff that comes with kind of the church scene, never really jived with it. So kind of had like a love-hate relationship with Christianity growing up, but it definitely influenced me to kind of be more of an upstanding citizen, if you will, and kind of that helped shape my code, so to speak, that I live to this day.
Yeah. So, like, what age are you at when you're starting to really feel like you're finding your own way, your own path?
Yeah, it was weird because I remember at a time I tried on being like atheist, probably around like 11 to 12, maybe 13 even, and that didn't really feel good inside, because even when I would tell myself like I don't believe in XYZ, if I wanted something, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, God, if there is a God,
time to show up.
Yeah.
Time to show up. Prove yourself, dog.
Prove it. Where are the receipts? If I do this, will you do this?" And it's funny because I feel like God, he, she, they, it would be like, "Oh, okay, like this, I'll show you." So like stuff would happen, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then sitting there like, "Oh, okay, well maybe there is, you know, someone somewhere up there listening to my prayers, listening to my requests, as outlandish as they may be."
Low-key demands sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's be real.
Yeah, this is what I want. I want it now, and I'm willing to, do whatever it takes to get it. But and I think that all kind of faded away. I don't know an exact like pivotal moment, but I feel like as I grew older, I think the idea of there being a God definitely, I don't know, took root a little bit more. The one time that's coming to mind is actually when in college, so this had to be around 17, 18, probably around like 2011, 2012, I started seeing repeating number sequences. My number was 117. And I would see this number everywhere. My friends thought I was going crazy because I was like, guys, there's this number. It's following me around. There it is, you know. And they're like, okay, Max, like, whatever. And eventually I hopped on Google, which was my God at the time.
Yeah, dude. The all-knowing.
Yeah. I'm like, what does repeating number 117 mean? And apparently there's like a whole glossary of numbers that, you know, people had been documenting, people from all over the world having similar experiences. And mine was just like, you're a light worker, you're on a spiritual path, you know, said stuff about like being, you know, potentially starting your own spiritual business. And right around then I started to kind of think like, whoa, maybe I was born for a reason. Maybe I was born for a purpose. And I think that's really when God started to show up more and more around that time in my life to really just kind of fully transition me from like being skeptical to like moving into like, a full knowing, not like a belief, but like a knowing that there is a higher power that's kind of guiding my life. And it was just like through those miraculous moments from the repeating numbers, because this is the way I looked at it. It was like, what is the probability of all these three numbers, you know, repeating, and I seeing it 10, 12 times a day? Well, that to me was a miracle. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, that's
you feel seen. I mean, in those ways. And to me, I think like synchronicity is, you know, I love the work of Carl Jung and things, and that being a very valid thing that shows up in people's lives. For sure. And for me, connecting it to divinity is like you feel seen. One of my friends that introduced me to astrology for the first time, he was somebody who is he was a worship leader at a church, and he's transitioned out of that world and has always been like a in the closet astrologer person, astrologist. And I was just asking him about like, what was it that opened you up to this? And he said that he was having a little bit of a, you know, uncertainty about where he was at about God. Yeah. And he felt like whenever he looked at his birth chart for the first time and had someone explain it to him, he's like, I felt extremely seen in like the hidden places of my being. Wow. And he's like, nobody could know this about me, you know, and not necessarily that I'm like trying to market for, you know, astrology, but things like phenomenon, synchronicities that happen, or you learn about, you know, things like this that Christians view as like off the table, you know, the conversation. You're able to really see like how cared for you are by the divine. And like like you said, like it was a actual experience. You talk about what's a tagline for the mystic lens. It's you know, realizing that experience is everything. Yeah. And that's really, even when it comes to the Bible, this is a documentation of many experiences that real people had with the infinite. Yeah. And so what you're experiencing at that college time is a real intimate experience with the infinite that gives you a new perspective or a paradigm shift about the possibility of your life. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so when you start integrating that, what does life begin to look like now when you're starting to be open to the path of a light worker, or what that might look like in your life?
Yeah, immediately the first word that comes to mind, and I've been thinking about this as, you know, not really sure about what we're going to talk about, but I think the biggest thing is peace. Like there's this unshakable peace that comes with knowing that you're held. Like there's this divine tapestry that is being woven behind the scenes that we don't really need to try or do something for, but like knowing that God, my angels, my spirit guides are working tirelessly to make sure that I'm taken care of, I'm fed, I'm clothed, I'm sheltered. And like it gives you this peace deep within your being that you're okay. And I think that that's one thing that I like to pass on to other people, especially through my work, as sort of like a spiritual guide. I wish that everyone could feel that peace, because it takes away this incessant need to like control, or like to try to fix, or try to manipulate and feel like we're like the masters of our destiny. I think in some ways we are, but there is like a higher power that's just like got your back. And when you're able to release and to, like it's even emotional just talking about it, like just knowing that you're so well taken care of, like that is everything.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's really what the whole work is about. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Because it's really, a friend of mine was talking to me. He used to be a mega church pastor, and he's not anymore. And he does a lot of spiritual direction work and work with psychedelics and things now. But he was saying, you know, I'm just trying to show people the possibility of what life can be like with real peace. Yeah. And he's like, all the years that I was, you know, the guy that was supposed to be the leader, he's like, I didn't have any of the things I was actually preaching about, you know? And he's like, now I feel like I've embodied that more. And because of that, there's no like, you know, trying to get myself or anyone else to a particular point. Yeah. But it's about that resting into that flow that's there. Yeah. And carrying you. For sure. That feels like a pivotal time in your life too. Like when you're in college, you're in college trying to figure out, what am I here to do? What can I learn to do? Yeah. All of that. And it feels like a very synchronistic time in and of itself. For sure. To show you the pathway forward. Yeah. And a lot of people are in college. I didn't go to a university or anything. I went through other Bible schooling that was not accredited, you know, or anything, but nonetheless. But I've noticed even whenever I was like a youth pastor and working with young adults, is like there tends to be just this absolute inner fear that like it's up to them now to do something with their life. You know, they're outside of their parents' provision for the most part, not all of them. Yeah. But like it's got to be up to me now to do something, and there's like this big weight. And it feels like at that moment, like you were able to see that like you've been carried and you're going to be carried. Yeah. In a time where it's tempting to like take all that weight upon yourself. For sure. You know? Yeah. Yeah. So like what era was that you're talking? Like I'm
thinking, this was like when it first started happening was around 2011, 2012. And you know, that was just kind of like the neon sign of like you're taken care of, and I didn't really fully root into my being that like I'm so well taken care of until there's this really embarrassing moment that happened, but just like showed me that like, oh, I'm so held. Went to a rave in DC, took some acid, and completely lost it. I think I was possessed in some way, but I had no control over my body. I left the club, just ended up, it was like a dissociative experience. I was watching myself outside of my body. I was completely butt naked, running around, causing it's okay to laugh. It's hilarious. And you know, I was just causing a scene. I almost got arrested, and something inside me just told me to run away when these cops or security or whatever finally caught up with me. And long story short, I wake up just butt naked in someone's backyard, and I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like this is the all-time low. Like it can't get worse than this. No phone, no ID, no nothing. And there was this moment of like, I just was like, God, take the wheel. Like obviously I am not doing what I should be doing. Like I don't, there's obviously some misalignment here if I'm waking up butt naked. And at the time I had no idea. I had amnesia. So it was like, I had no idea what happened. I'm literally in my own feces. So like it was disgusting and very shameful. And at the moment I was just like, God, like take the wheel. And literally right after that moment, someone like comes out of their house, they're walking their dog. And I'm like, hey man, I'm like covering up my balls. And I'm like, I don't know what happened, but like can I use a phone or something like that? Can't remember what I said, but this guy's looking at me like, what the fuck?
What are you doing in my yard? Like,
but he lets me in, gives me some clothes, calls the police, and the cops show up, and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy that was running around on PCP," and I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" I missed getting arrested again. They obviously wanted nothing to do with me. They went along their way. They're like, "Figure it out, buddy." This guy ends up giving me his phone to call my friend. I'm calling my friend, and she's been looking for me frantically for the past couple hours. So as soon as I tell her where I am, she is now coming to my rescue, followed by the cops that she had recruited from the station. So now those guys are actually looking for me, ready to arrest me because I got away earlier. So luckily I get kicked out of this guy's house. He's like, "Your friend's taking too long. Like, I'll take you to the train station." Gives me $4. I get on the last train to a random station in DC because I'm out of money. I don't have anywhere to go. And I kid you not, a free shuttle bus to my hometown just shows up and they're like, "Oh, come on in." And I get a shuttle and I, make my way home. But it's like, you can't make that up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like all those events happening and just me avoiding getting arrested like 3 times by this point. And that was a moment where I was like, okay, like I need to turn some things around. And now that I've made this commitment with God, like I need to like live up my end of the bargain and, live by God's direction. And ever since then.
So that was your real pivotal moment of like taking this seriously or sincerely,
For sure.
So the first was kind of just like the sign of being carried.
Yeah.
The next situation is like, okay, like I'm going to actually put in some energy to cultivating this in my life. Dude, I freaking love that story. Thanks for sharing that with us all. It's so good. Yeah, man. Like, it's always the stuff that's like in the moment, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. But then you look back and those are the moments that it's like a pivotal circumstance every single time. Yeah. And that's how it's been. I think that's just the human story is like there is something that happens that catapults a whole nother thing, So you get back, you get into your own clothes. And when was this? A couple weeks ago? I'm just playing.
This is 2013, September 2013. We'll never forget it.
So then so you go into this part of your life now, and what's kind of the set and setting? What's going on in your world? Where are you at? Because you're not in San Diego yet.
Yeah, I'm still back in Maryland, in my hometown, getting ready to graduate from community college. Studying psychology, about to get my associates. It's around this time that I'm introduced to entrepreneurship and leadership. And so I feel like there was just like around that time, there was just this rumbling of my foundation. At the time I thought I was going to, go and get my bachelor's, study psychology, but entrepreneurship, specifically network marketing, was introduced to me. And I was just getting around a lot of people that were all about business, living life on your own terms, spirituality. I was reading so much personal development books. And it was at this time in my life where I really wanted to start taking myself more seriously. And I was kind of killing it in business at the time. And wasn't making like tons of money, but I was just getting this validation of people are like, yo, like, how are you showing up? How are you making these sales? How are you doing this? Like right off the bat, you're very natural at this. And it was around that time that people started being like, oh, like you should be a life coach, because it was around that time where not only was I showing up and doing public speaking and making sales and networking, but I was also kind of that point of contact for people that needed like motivation when they're feeling like, oh, maybe this isn't the right path for me, or like just life struggles. I was always a safe space for people to land and kind of help them with what they were going through. And this idea of coaching came into my world, and I was like, what's a life coach? And I looked up Tony Robbins and was like, oh, like this is a real deal. You know, I don't have to go and become a therapist. I can just become a life coach. And around then I was also starting to meditate more. I was starting to do like chakra balancing meditations, and had a lot of other weird experiences that started happening that kind of pointed me in the more spiritual direction. I started having like sleep paralysis, which is like a whole other tangent, so I'll try to keep it concise. But I was having a lot of weird supernatural things happen that kind of pointed me in the direction of like, okay, yes, you're going to be a coach, but there's going to be kind of more a spiritual component to it that's you know, going to allow you to help people in that way as well. So I don't even remember your question.
It doesn't matter. We're just, this is the good stuff. We're riffing, you know?
Yeah.
Following where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that you, like, being sensitive to that and then pressing into that, obviously that's been a part of like your makeup and has been a big element of what you do now.
Yeah.
But back then, I'm curious, like, what did you feel like was the sort of thing that kept coming up for you in terms of like to share, you know, like what was the, because sometimes like we feel these like calling and people begin to come to us and things begin to show, life shows you who you are and what you're supposed to do here. God shows you that and equips you for that. Like, what did that look like for you in terms of like showing other people, introducing them maybe even to spiritual practices, like you said Tony Robbins, what were some of the other like more spiritual influences at that time that were creating your framework and worldview?
Yeah, I mean, I read The Power of Now, The Alchemist. I was introduced to Jim Rohn. I was introduced to all types of kind of influences of their time through their books and audio recordings. And you know, in terms of what I felt called to share, I think I was still figuring it out. There was no like, oh, like now I know what I'm supposed to do, now I know my message, now I know like exactly who I'm here to serve. It was a lot of stumbling and tumbling, and my main outlet was Facebook. I was just sharing my experiences and trying to be as authentic as possible about my experience, and I find that just that alone was very helpful. A lot of people would report that that's a breath of fresh air, especially, you know, in the online space or the coaching space where everyone's putting on a mask, or just in like culture in general, where everyone's trying to be something that they're not so that they can make money and live their best life. And something that I'm really proud of that I was able to kind of embody at that stage was like, here's all my baggage, here's all the things that I'm going through. I'm not perfect, but here's my journey. This is what I'm going through. And I find that in those early years, it was really what allowed people to feel safe and comfortable with bringing their shit to me, bringing their struggles, their problems. Even if I wasn't able to completely help them, you know, change it, it was like, this is a person that I can come to. This is a relationship that I can have where I can let my walls down. And I feel like when it comes to healing work, when it comes to, you know, being there for other people, that's the most healing part. You know, it's the relationship. So whether or not I had all the tools or had all the qualifications and skills that I have now, it was like I was showing up, I was being authentic with my connection with the divine and my path and, you know, the things that are helping with me. And it was just like, come and share and, you know, be yourself around me. And
then you got involved more. So like how would you kind of qualify where you were at, like spiritually at that time? Like I often share a lot about people tend to come to Current in terms of like two doors. There's a lot. I mean, you could argue that everybody individually is their own unique door in their own experience. But by and large, it seems like people come through this like more of a spiritualist idea, a very open idea, maybe even new age space. And then they have an interest in Jesus, and they are curious about some of his teachings without all of the religion and dogma from all the other places, and they kind of want to dip their toe into what this is.
For sure.
Then the other side's like, I call them like open-minded traditionalists. It's like people that have maybe a Christian background, and they're just either they don't have an affiliation with that anymore, they still do, but they're open to, sound healing and things and the stuff that is very different. It seems like you come through that first door, even though you have some of the earlier life framework.
Yeah.
When did that begin to take an interest in like I know for one of our mutual friends, she talks about how there's a shift between understanding like universe and spirituality is this very vague, big, open thing to a very much more intimate and specific, like in referencing God as God and things. Like, was there like a shift towards in your spirituality, or do you feel like you've kind of been on this same arc and trajectory, or do you feel like it's taken some distinct movements over these years?
Great question. I was deep into the new age. If you want to call it that. I was definitely one of those guys that had crystals in his pocket. Well, still do, or I guess I came back to it over some time, but definitely was referring to it as the universe, and it was like, oh, I'm not going to call it God, I'm going to call it the universe. Let me pray to my angels about this. Let me manifest, do all the things that I guess a new agey person would do. Got the sage, got the loose fitting clothes, all that. It definitely went down that pipeline for a minute. And it's funny because there's a lot of the things of that world that I still incorporate in my practice. I still believe in angels. I still believe in spirit guides. But I'm definitely not as like spiritually bypassy as I was before. I definitely have elements of it, but like, I was definitely an airhead. No offense to anyone out there that's very airhead, but I was definitely an airhead.
We all are in some ways.
Yeah, definitely just floating above the problems of the world. Just like, whatever's meant to be will be, and let the universe figure it out. And so I think it's really interesting because during that time, going back to the sleep paralysis, where I very believe that, negative entities can mess with you when you're, in that state of sleep, I would call upon Jesus and immediately it would stop. And so Jesus was always in my corner. I guess at the time I kind of was programmed to see Jesus as like an ascended master, back then, just like one of the many other ascended masters out there that you have like Buddha or, whoever the heck else out there that they talk about. But now I think I see Jesus in the story of Jesus and Christ as like a very important and like pivotal character entity of humanity that deserves a little bit more recognition and respect than just I don't know if I want to say it that way, but it's like there's a lot more to the story of Christ and Jesus than I think people are giving. I don't know how to best say it. Yeah,
I get it. I follow you. Yeah, because I mean, what I hear you saying is that, like, especially too, and this tends to be what I hear from a lot of folks, and I come from a charismatic church background, so we definitely grew up with, we called it spiritual warfare, that there's demons and angels, and that all the time there's like this gnarly battle that's happening around you all the time, and we could riff on that if we want, but I think that just to, I guess, say, like, I think there's some validity to that. I don't think at this point, I think a lot of it is also the projection of my own inner insecurities and shadows onto a demonic being, because then I don't have to take I don't have to assume any responsibility for it. Yeah. I could just be like, oh, it was a demonic temptation.
Yeah.
Shut this door. The friggin'
I'm
trash
late to work.
truck.
I'm late to work. Sorry, it was a demon.
Right. Yeah, I got caught up in spiritual warfare, boss. Sorry, And your boss is like, that doesn't have anything to do with filing the paperwork, but it does. So like, I with that said, I think most of it in the resource Words Create Worlds that I write about, like demons and Satan in there for a little bit, is like, I do think that there is dark energy, and I think that we should recognize our own spiritual authority in that. And I don't think we should camp around it too long, because if it really is, if what Jesus showed us is that, like, it's not a big deal. Like, you just handle the business and move on with your calling. And that's how it works. And we tend to focus on that negativity so much. It's a little bit of a rant and tangent here.
No, it's important.
But like,
go off, King.
You had mentioned about your sleep paralysis and that, and I've noticed that a lot of people who either have a background with Jesus and then revisit him, or they don't, and they just are doing anything that they can in some of those really fearful moments. They use this name, and there is some sort of energetic, connection, empowerment, and authority in an unseen realm with that. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've had people even recently talk to me about that. So can you talk us a little bit through even feel free, like, as much as you feel comfortable, like, dive into this sleep paralysis thing and that, because I'm sure people, this is why we're doing this, is if people are having that happen or whatever, now they have somebody that they can talk to about it.
No, I mean, I think that there is definitely a power in Christ, and I think the biggest thing that I've learned through my connection with Christ and going down this rabbit hole is that we are beings of light, and we have a divine authority and a divine protection when we're living in our power and like being that light. And there's times in our lives when we're not being in that light, when we're not living from our soul, when we're kind of, operating from something else, just keep it simple. And like, when you're sleeping, I believe that we have an astral body that travels, and if you're not aware of this aspect of your being, of your soul, and where it can be going and traveling, you kind of end up in the ghetto of the astral realm, if you will. And so I think that it's important to be discerning about the kind of energies that you invite into your life, or like, a lot of people that will be engaging with drugs, like I was, psychedelics especially. There's a lot of people that will do ayahuasca and will not have any form of spiritual protection, that will, attract any kind of stragglers in the astral realm, if you will. And it's important to just have that knowledge, because whether you believe it or not, it's kind of happening, behind the scenes. And so I think it's just something as simple as saying a prayer before bed, if you're someone that's struggling with this, can definitely mitigate that. I pray before every time before I go to bed, every time before I take a nap, just because I know that this stuff is real and it's out there. Not that you have to be scared of it, but it's like spiritual hygiene. It's like something as simple as brushing your teeth, or if you're going to go outside and it's going to rain, you bring an umbrella with you. It doesn't have to be more, you don't have to take it personal that, it's going to be raining outside. And so I think a lot of people need to just chill out a little bit, and it's not that serious, but it should be taken seriously, because I think that these things can definitely have an effect on you if you're just willy-nilly, just doing drugs all the time, and just you're opening up your energy to all kinds of influences. And in my work as a medium and as a healer, these things do show up, and so I just like to tell people about it, believe it or not, but these things are things that can affect you. They can affect your health. And I think it's just like,
whenever, and also too, I've noticed a trend that, like, especially there's like a resurgence of people that are becoming Christian again, but they're becoming like fundamentalist Christians. And that's just because the world's a very volatile, scary place right now. And that's normal. But it discounts the fact of, like, when those people start saying everything's demonic, you really discount the times that it really is something that is a dark energy that is there. Whenever it's like, I don't agree with it, so it's demonic, or it's not biblical, so it's demonic, or whatever. It's like you really dilute And it's like the boy that cried wolf, you know.
Yeah,
then you don't really know.
Yeah.
Whenever you don't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like, one of the key elements of spiritual maturity is discernment.
For sure.
How do you discern what's really a threat, what's really not a threat, what's really me, what's not? And as I went into my own inner world, I realized a lot of it is me dealing with my own conditioning and baggage and all of this stuff, as we talked about a few minutes ago, and realizing that and I mentioned this very openly at Current, is like, you know, my own self-sabotage self. Me and you have talked about that before. And it's like, how much of that is demonic oppression and how much of it is just like my energetic makeup that I just am here to like learn how to not be so neurotic, you know?
No, 100%. Yeah. While you were talking, it's something that I see a lot. I don't know how many people identify as leaders or people that, you know, feel that light worker archetype, so to speak. But I feel like dark energies or entities tend to fuck with those people more, so to speak, because here you are standing for truth and for light. And if they can do anything that they can to get you off that path, they're going to do that. So anyone else that doesn't really kind of funnel into that leadership position or, you know, stand for God, stand for truth, stand for light, you're probably not going to have to worry about that kind of stuff because they're not going to see you as a threat, so to speak. But I do find with a lot of the clients that I work with, it's like when you start to radiate more light and you're starting to bring people back to God, so to speak, or you're showing people that there's more to life than fear and greed and lust and all the base, lower negative energies, then you then become, I don't want to say target because that sounds like dramatic, but in a way you do become a target. But then I look at that as a beautiful thing because it's like, oh, like I'm a big deal enough for you to want to fuck with me. Cool. Like, and all you have to really do is like, know that, like I said before, you are that light, you are divinity incarnate. And if you stand in that truth and if you, embody more of your soul, then you have nothing to worry about because that light then becomes too powerful for any negative energies to even be able to penetrate your energy field or your aura or to be able to influence you. But yeah, I think that one thing that I love the most about my work is just reminding people of that. Like, you are a lighthouse of love and light, and everyone has that within them. And that's why I think it's so cool that being in a community of other, you know, mystics, if you will, there is such a palpable energy of love and light. When I step into Current, you know, the first time I went in there, I started crying because I could feel it. I could feel that, like you said, there are other people of like heart, not just like mine, but like that higher energy, that higher frequency is so palpable that I haven't really seen in other spaces that I've visited.
Yeah, man. It's funny you say that, because like I or, you know, synchronistic in some ways, because I'm like, I feel that way too. Like, I feel so much of just a tangibility of the people there. And it's like everybody's at different places on the continuum of their journey, but there's that sincere connection that it's like a raw honesty about life and what it means to live in union with divinity. And it's just, it's a breath of fresh air even for myself still, you know. Do you feel like that confidence in that the light that's within you, even Jesus says, you know, you are the light of the world, you know, and nobody puts a light underneath a basket, you know, they put it on the shelf for people to see, and it becomes a city on a hill that people can look to. And in ancient times, that was a big deal, because when you're roaming through the desert, you see a light, a city of light on a hill. That is refuge. You are refuge to people wandering through life. And we have all been in that place and have found refuge in other people. We can all name people in our life, whether we know them or not personally, that were lighthouses for us.
For sure.
And our role is to be a lighthouse as well, and to, you know, not just us, but then to reproduce other people that are lighthouses for others. And that's how, in my opinion, the world's actually changed.
I agree.
When did that confidence come for you? Like, was it in this sleep paralysis time? Because I've noticed a lot of people sometimes struggle with accepting the light of divinity that's within them.
Yeah.
They don't believe that that's a possibility, or in Christian spaces, it's like, that was only Jesus.
Yeah.
That's not me. That
Yeah.
was only him. But that's the nuance between Jesus and Christ. Christ is the thing that is been bestowed in all of us,
Exactly.
as the Apostle Paul says. So it's even biblical for all of you people that are obsessed with being that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like is this the time that you really rested into that for yourself?
I think it's definitely been a process, and I'll be the first to admit that I don't always stand in that light and that confidence. But I'd say
we're human.
Yeah. We'll just keep it real here. But I definitely do more than I do not. But it's been a process. I think that one of the big pivotal time that I was able to really ground that in, for the most part, was I moved out to Hawaii after college, and I joined a mystery school where I kind of got my healer's tool belt, so to speak, where I learned how to hold space for others in a transformational way, so to speak. And in that, I would always start with prayer. And I was always start with, coming into your heart, coming into your light. And in order to really hold space for people in a God-led way, you have to kind of embody that, so to speak. And over the years, I've now been a leader facilitator for going on 11 years. And so it's something that kind of just comes naturally to me now, but it definitely took some time and a lot of reflection from other people to be like, oh, like, I see this light in you. I see, God working through you and in your life. And you hear that enough times where it's like, okay, I think that there's something real here.
Yeah, it's really good. And that's to the point of spiritual community, why it's important, because we call out the truth in each other. And I think that's something that was lacking in myself. My wife, Lindsay, and I talk about it all the time. Like, in our charismatic space, people would get what they would call a word of knowledge for you, or they would, back in the day, they'd call it reading your mail, and they would see something that was good? Personal. Yeah, they would have a knowledge about something personal in you. Like, because, you think about, like, maybe our younger crowd doesn't know as much, but it was, if you have something of mail, it's like, that's for you. And it's like a federal offense if you open up somebody else's mail, right? And so they would read your mail, something that's addressed to you from God.
Okay.
And they would have a knowing about it.
Yeah.
And they would tell you that, and you would feel seen because it would validate it, because you're like, that was addressed to me.
Yeah.
And somebody else, how did this person know that? And they would basically come as like support. And that's what church did. And for my wife and I, when we were young, if it was spiritual in that way, where people would encourage each other and call things out of each other and stuff. And for these years that we were not involved in church spaces, or when we were, it was very like, and there's a space for this, but it was mostly like social justice oriented, which that's great, but it was more like political influence, and it was not as spiritual. And so it was like extremely validating whenever people started to come around us, or even when we first started the first version of Current back in 2020, whenever lockdown was just barely starting to let up some, I had a random pastor in town call me out of nowhere and was just like, he's like, are you starting? I was still working at a church in Oceanside. I didn't tell anybody we were starting yet. He goes, are you starting a church? And I'm like, I'm feeling that prompt. He says, in his language, the Lord woke me up in a dream last night and told me to call you and say that he's put it on your heart to start a church and that you have to do it.
Yeah.
And, he's like he's a pastor of a large church here in town, and I've not talked to him in years.
Whoa.
And it's like, that's the stuff that like spiritual community is necessary for, and granted, that version wasn't what it should be, and that I spent more years, but it doesn't matter. The point is that like, I remembered that in my heart.
Yeah, the seed was planted.
Right.
Yeah.
And that encouragement was there. And I feel like what our job is to do is to just help call that out of people.
Yeah.
And that's what community is there for, you know? And so I love that there's like the spiritual element and being brought back in. And I love that you bring that in. Yeah. And that's what you carry with you. Yeah. If you're okay on time, I'd like to jump in on a couple other things really quick.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know what time it is, but you reference your work as being a medium. Mediumship is what you do, and a lot of people that do come from Christian backgrounds are like, whoa, why are we talking medium here? What's going on with this? You know, and I have my own take on that, but I would rather you share what it is that you do, and especially like talking about it through this lens of like in the spiritual space, like you've witnessed this authority in yourself, but also in the narrative and the person of Jesus in this. Like, what does mediumship mean to you, and how does that relate to this expression of I don't know what to call it anymore, but you know, this version of the spiritual path for you? Yeah. What does that look like?
You know what's so funny? I think it's so weird that people get hung up about mediumship, because basically what it means to me is just being a channel for messages from people that have passed on. Not just people, but pets as well. And, you know, also angels can come through as well. And the crazy thing is, past cultures, and even in Christianity, I believe, you know, talking to dead people was a part of the lore, you know. And I think that, you know, even in times where, you know, people would talk to Jesus and he would come to them after his passing, you know, that is just a form of mediumship in my opinion. And so I think that if people were to look back at in the past and realize that like every culture basically has some form of people like shamans, if you will, or medicine people that have been able to pass on messages from the departed. And I think it's almost only a recent invention that's a result of like trying to control people, of like, oh, that's not good. We don't talk to the dead. Like that's against the religion, or that's taboo. I think it's just people are uncomfortable with it because they don't understand it. And if you talk to indigenous people, or, you know, even when I was in Hawaii, if I told people that I talk to dead people, they're like, okay, cool. Yeah. So do I, you know, it's not weird because it's part of their culture. And so I just encourage people to look back, you know, get on AI, ChatGPT or whatever, you know, just ask, you know, tell me a list of cultures that believe in a mediumship, and you'll be humbled really quickly. And for me, this is definitely not something that I ever decided to get into. You know, I think I told you before, it freaks me out even still. You know, sometimes I'll be doing a session for clients, and just the specific details that come through to validate to people that their loved ones are in fact with them. You know, for example, I was doing a client for a friend, a session for a friend, and her loved one, her grandma, came through and just brought up a very specific day, the last time that they'd hung out like by the beach, and they went to a diner, and that's just like what came out of my mouth. And she breaks down into tears and just like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's not me. It's just, I have attuned my energy and my intuition to be able to pick up on these messages. And I believe that everyone has that ability. Whether we use it or not, is really up to each person. But I think it's such a gift for me to be able to do this work, because it challenges me and it brings out the best in me. Because in order to be a good medium, you essentially just have to be a better person. You have to, you know, you have to live in a way that I wouldn't say is like completely godly, but you got to meditate more. You got to, you know, deal with your traumas, your hurts. You have to basically become a clear vessel for these higher vibrational entities, so you will, if you will, to be able to speak through you, so to speak. So it's very humbling. It's very weird. Some people might call it witchy. I don't care. Hey, it is kind of witchy. You know, I don't have like a crystal ball or anything, but I would like one if anyone wants to get me a crystal ball. That'd be cool.
They're expensive, dude.
Yeah, they are very expensive.
Yeah. But, you know, I think with that is like, even if, and this is what you mentioned it earlier, what I always talk about is being like-hearted and like-minded. And I think even in this is, it's like, people could listen and they could say like, I just don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. There's probably other parts of this conversation that you were like, exactly what Max was saying was resonating at the core of my being. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is resonances, and then there are differences. And I think it's like learning what that is for you and what's necessary for you as a person in this season of your life.
For sure.
And that may never be for somebody listening, and it might be for others. And I think for me, like, whenever I think about being or hearing from someone being a medium, you know, because my upbringing would be very skeptical of that. But yet we have prophets and prophetesses and people reading other people's mail. That's a very psychic thing.
Yeah, that's divination.
That is it's just clothed in language that we feel comfortable with, and it happens in a building that we all agree on is safe. Exactly. And that's the difference. And I think in a large part, like, people being comfortable with accepting the ways that God communicates with us, and that we're supposed to have each other to do that. That, you know, I think using the language of mystic, it's your own inner experience and intimacy with God, but also then there's the communal aspect where we help each other do that, walk each other home. Yeah. I think what people where they get hung up on some of this is trusting that it really is what it is. Yeah. And I feel like, and maybe you can even help me get some clarity on this too, is like, it doesn't matter as much, like using familiar things like someone's grandma or something, that symbolizes a trust, or maybe something that needs to, you know, maybe there is a warmth there, or maybe there is a coldness there that needs to work through, who knows, but unique. But it's using familiar imagery in the imagination space to open you up to other possibilities. It's not as important for me, I guess, or you can correct me or whatever, but like that it's like, this is your grandma telling you that, but it's what message is coming through, that's the important thing. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. At the end of the day, is it helping or is it hurting? You know, for that specific example, this client, she never got a chance to say goodbye to her grandmother. She was in another state. She passed suddenly, and she was holding that guilt and that grief of never being able to have that closure with her grandmother. And being able to have that experience where she essentially talked to her grandma and was able to have that final goodbye took a weight off of her shoulders. And, you know, I'm not saying that this is me or like completely attributing that session to this, but like, ever since I've seen her talk to this person, her energy is so much lighter. She's so much more present and expressive. You know, there's a definite weight off her shoulders, and that's really what I hope to give to people. That's why I consider myself a healer, because these are healing experiences. And, you know, some people might argue, you know, you could be channeling a demon or whatever. How do you know like what you're getting the message from is of God? But it's like, if it wasn't of God, would this be resulting in healing? Would this be resulting in such positive things? I don't think so.
Right. You'll know a tree by its fruit, Jesus says.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's the thing. People don't, I think also too, in our Western world, we don't navigate the unseen very well. Yeah. And because of that, it's just easier. Rules always makes things easier on the surface level. Yeah. You know, but
feel safe.
Right. But there's always more to that. And I think people just don't know how to navigate the spiritual. Yeah. And because of that, it's just easier to close that door completely.
For sure.
And so I think like learning that, because people, it's always like growing up, it was like, if there's a medium, they're channeling demons 100% every time. Yeah. Your grandma doesn't have anything to say to you, but a demon does. Exactly. And they will use that image to get into you. And sometimes that's true. Yeah. And I think it comes down to the person, like, being that medium, or even like I had a spiritual direction session with the lady who used to be at Bethel, which is a school up in Redding. They're a charismatic school. And this like new student wanted to lay her hands on her and pray for her. And she says, don't put your hands on me. I don't know where you've come from or what you've picked up or what you're like, don't just experiment on me.
For sure.
And she's like, just because we're in a church doesn't mean that you're not, you know, carrying other things or whatever. Yeah. And I think that there's something to that. It really comes down to your discernment, who you're opening yourself up to, and all of that. Yeah. And yeah, because I there's also, for those people that are maybe feeling challenged by this too, there is actually an instance, I won't go in extreme detail, but in the Old Testament, there's a particular prophet who's summoned by a king, and that king wants to inquire wisdom from a earlier prophet, and that prophet calls out of the spiritual realm the deceased prophet, and the king inquires him of wisdom. That's, I mean, if you were to tell any Christians that today, they'd freak out.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't know what to do with that. Yet it's in your Bible.
Yeah.
And we're just so not familiar with these things.
Yeah.
We're not comfortable with these things. Or even another prophet, you know, a king calls him and he tells him, go to this place that's 7 miles away and bathe in this particular river, and then the leprosy will be gone, and like all this stuff. And it's like very particular, weird, esoteric, far out things are happening.
Yeah.
And this is all taking place in your Bible where you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I think we don't trust things in real time.
For sure.
We have a temptation to think because it's in a book, it stays in the book and it's okay and safe there.
Yeah.
But to be a mystic, to keep using that language so much, is it's about that experiential, real life in real time experience with God.
For sure.
And so you as a medium, you are being sensitive in the spirit to where people are at, to what God is doing in someone else's life, and creating a sort of bridge for people to find healing, to find wholeness, to find resolve, to let baggage go. I mean, Jesus says, come to me all who are weary, because I'll give you rest. We're trying to help people find rest and let go of their burdens.
Yes.
My burden is light. And so you are doing that in a way that is just like not in a safe way that Christianity is used to.
Yeah.
Right? But you have a affinity for Jesus still in that way. And I want to help people see that, like, this whole experience is way wider and larger, more expansive than we've ever thought.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I guess, like, where you're at now, where do you see, and we can begin to close, I suppose. I don't know how long we've been talking for, but it's been fun.
Yeah.
So you doing okay on time?
I got like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So I think...
But can I just add something real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that this is going to kind of trip some people out and maybe have them think about this differently. But I would definitely consider you a medium, because a number of times I've heard people after the service say, oh, Luke said exactly what I needed to hear. Like, you're doing that exact same thing that I'm doing. You're just doing it in a different setting. So whether your messages are coming from your higher self or your guides or from God directly, you're basically acting as you're stepping out of your ego is being set aside, and you're becoming a channel of light and and that space, like you were just talking about before, for other people. And I believe that everyone that gets called into these spaces at exactly the right time, they hear exactly what they need to hear. You're doing the exact same thing. You're just calling it something different. You're a minister, but you're also a medium. And I think that it would help people who are having trouble with really wrapping their head around that, to realize that this is already happening, especially if they've had that experience where they come into current and like, oh, I needed to hear that. You know what I mean? I believe that is divine. You couldn't have planned that. They couldn't have planned that, you know? And yeah, I think it's really all about perspective. And I think that there are people that are just simply not ready to accept that. I believe that we all have, you know, like older or younger souls, so to speak. And some people, and not saying that there's better or worse, right? But it's like, there is a growth, there is a development of a soul. And I feel like people that have older souls just have this knowing, they have this feeling of, they know that there's truth to this. Not saying that everything that we're saying is absolute truth, but there's like a knowing that that can't be like falsified or just kind of made up, you know. And other people that don't have maybe that soul development, it's still going to feel foreign, and it's going to feel like deceitful, or it's going to feel like heretical, or because they are not there yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I'm not going to be angry or mad at people that don't believe in what I do, because it's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me.
Right.
Like, that's okay. I'm not trying to force anyone to believe anything. It's like, you'll have your experiences, and you can either believe it or not. And, you know, God's always going to be there shining down on all of us like the sun does.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Right. And growing what needs to be grown in the proper times. They're supposed to be grown.
Exactly. That's the point of life.
Right. That's so good. Man, we should almost just close it there. I feel like that's perfect. That's a perfect ending. Okay, I guess we'll end with just, if people want to get in touch with you, and maybe somebody's listening to this and they're not local and they're not going to see you on a Sunday sometime, like, how do people get in touch with you? What are some of the ways? And we'll include everything below, of course, but anything you want to highlight right now?
You can find me on Facebook, Maximilian Webster. I'm on Instagram, maximilian.webster.intl. And yeah, come play, come see my content. If I'm posting, I don't really post much nowadays, but I think I'm going to get into it more. This is definitely the intention.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thanks for coming and joining me on the couch today.
Yeah, it's been fun, bro. Thank you so much for having me.
This is where we landed. Yeah. It's so good.
Cheers.